Hello and welcome back to Idea Sex, where we take an analytical lens to mysticism and spirituality. My name is Kiara, the Mad Witch, and today we are continuing with the second half of 7 things I wish I would have known during a spiritual awakening. If you haven't had a spiritual awakening, don't watch this video because I'm just going to sound like I belong in a padded cell. If you're in the midst of a spiritual awakening, I would like to reassure you that you don't belong in a padded cell. And if you've been on the journey for a while, you know that we pretty much all live in a padded cell until we wake up anyway. So picking up where we left off, and it doesn't really matter the order you watch them in, but in the last video, we left off on the idea that sometimes during a spiritual awakening, things fall apart, or everything falls apart. And it depends on how out of alignment we are. So the further out of alignment we are, the more we stand to lose, which is why one of the hallmarks of a spiritual awakening is loss, especially in the beginning stages. Spiritual awakening is a lifelong process, but in those initial stages where we're starting to come back into alignment, we tend to lose the things that are not in alignment with, you could call it your soul, you could call it your highest good, but that can look like jobs, connections, lifestyles, anything really that is not in alignment can just kind of crumble away. And it can be terrifying, terrifying. That low point is sometimes called the dark night of the soul or the tower moments. After my initial tower moments, as discussed in the last video, I remember feeling like the universe had cleared a space in my life. It was like a controlled burn. And the question became, what is it that you're gonna grow here now? And I think it's in those moments where our inner child has the perfect opportunity to reemerge, right? Because we can either look at a situation with fear or with this sense of it being a new beginning. We can either be like, oh no, these things I clung to so hard and couldn't hold on to, or we can look at it with an almost childlike wonder. And maybe that sounds ridiculous depending on what we've lost, but when we realize that the universe is not just a fundamentally friendly place, but a fundamentally loving and fundamentally playful place, then it's a lot easier to, I think, approach situations like that with a sense of being open to possibility, even when it seems like there are no possibilities. So by removing things that are out of alignment, holding us back, keeping us stuck, a space is cleared, and then we have the opportunity to decide what to fill that space with. Enter the inner child. It's as though the things we loved as children return to us like a song from the past and ask us to make music again. It's like picking up the pieces of ourselves we lost along the way. It's getting honest with ourselves about where we gave up on ourselves, why, and maybe trying again. We do this by getting back in touch with the things that bring us joy. And so I think of the Joseph Campbell quote, follow your bliss. And what most people don't know, a lot of people know that quote, it's very famous, but what most people don't know is that toward the end of his life, Campbell actually amended it to follow your blisters. And he said it was because people associated bliss with ease, with immediate gratification, and basically used it as an excuse to be hedonists. And so he said, I should have said, follow your blisters. And he kind of just left that open to interpretation. The way I interpret it is that discomfort is inevitable in life. So follow the things you love so much that you don't fucking care when they make you uncomfy, right? Like think of the word passion. It comes from the Latin passio, which means to suffer. So if suffering is inevitable, that's part of the human experience, what direction is worth suffering in? That's the question. I think often it goes back to those things we loved as children. And I'll use myself as a case study again, because I'm the case study I know best. But I would say I was novelty seeking as a child, still am. But a lot of those early loves have made their way onto this channel, right? Whether it's film, ideas, dress up, reading, storytelling, magic, just to name a few. And a friend actually said to me the other day, she was like, you know, I've been watching Idea Sex and it makes me feel like we're in 8th grade again. And I was like, yeah, it's my sandbox where I go to play with like-minded people. And so this has been a wonderful creative outlet, a great source of virtual connections. And it is also the only freaking reason I hold the 2 dream jobs that I'm currently working. And I really do believe that honoring our inner child is the secret to finding work we love. It's a vibe thing, man, which we'll talk about a little later. But this silly little hobby that I fucking love is the only reason that I now hold roles as an idea sorceress. That's the actual title at a venture studio, and a content strategist at an organization of leading researchers in non-local consciousness, all because one day I decided to honor my inner child, pick up a camera and make what I love, not with an end goal, not with an intention, just for love and for play. To me, this is what it means to honor our inner child, right? We hear a lot of talk, especially in spiritual circles, about healing the inner child. And that's because our core wounds that drive all of our unconscious behavior and poor choices are sustained during childhood, whether we look at it through the lens of developmental psychology or chakra psychology, okay? Whether it's the scientific lens, the mainstream approved lens, or the woo-woo lens, they say the same thing, which is that in our earliest years, it's then that our worldviews are shaped. How we view ourselves is shaped, and ultimately that determines who we become as adults. So in recovering and nurturing this psycho-spiritual archetype we call an inner child and allowing ourselves to play, we step more into alignment with our true selves. The fifth thing I wish I would have realized during a spiritual awakening is that it's okay to seek support, whether you are dealing with a spiritual awakening or something else entirely. I think it's important to note that we are never the only person. Like, no one's that fucking special. We all incarnated here as hairless monkeys, and as such, there's a finite number of experiences we can have. Fundamentally, we have a lot of the same experiences, human condition et al. But there is one relatively common kind of experience that people don't like to talk about. I love to talk about it. It's terribly taboo. And we started to touch on it in the last video. When people start to have a spiritual awakening, a lot of people will experience more synchronicities, but a number of us will also have psi experiences. Psi being short for psychic. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that playlist. When I started experiencing this shit, I did not tell anyone in my real life about it, because on one hand, I really didn't know what was happening. On the other, I was like, I don't want to sound crazy. And like, motherfucker, I am crazy. But that didn't necessarily mean I was wrong. And I was like, who can I talk to? Who can I trust with this information? And I was like, the internet. There's lots of crazy people on the internet. No one gives a f. And so I screamed into the void of the internet. And when a few people screamed back, I was emboldened. I was like, maybe I can have this conversation with a couple of my close friends and family members. And the most interesting thing happened. Not only did they listen with interest, but I realized you cannot talk about an awakening without other people wondering if and how it applies to their life. And so I watched as a couple of people actually were like, so Kiara thinks God is talking to her. Does God talk to me? And they started to listen. And yeah, I am not f***ing special. God talks to everyone all the time. And a spiritual awakening is just learning how to listen. Jobs aside, this is the biggest reason that I am so glad I started this, because since putting this stuff out there, just out there, a number of people have reached out and confided in me, both total internet strangers and people who are actually pretty close to me. And it's pretty much the same conversation every time. It's like, hey, I haven't told anyone about this because I'm afraid people will think I'm crazy, and then they tell me their story. And that has been the biggest privilege. Y'all sharing your stories with me is what made me realize that so many people have these experiences and are just afraid to talk about them. Because no one wants to be the crazy bitch. Which is why I've come to embrace the crazy, because how do we find each other if we're all hiding? And the deeper I get into reading the science behind spirituality, behind psychic phenomena, the more I realize that these conversations about consciousness, they have to be normalized. We have to be having them. Psi research is so important, because when people realize God talks back, that this unified energy field is actually interacting with our 3D lives, when that happens, the world is going to be a completely different place. So thank you, beautiful little guild of internet strangers, for letting me lean on you during that period of uncertainty. And whatever you're going through, whether it's awakening related or otherwise, I promise you're not the only one. And I would like to reassure you that if you go and look for it, your people are 100% out there. They're out there. The other thing I leaned on was books. And the books actually came before the channel, because I was trying to verify that a spiritual awakening is an actual documented thing. I was like, is what I'm experiencing real? And lo and behold, a lot of people have written on it. And my two top 2 recommendations for anyone having an awakening are The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle and The Surrender Experiment by Michael Sanger. This book, oh my God, I love it. So basically, this super successful dude is going to get his doctorate in economics, but he also takes up meditation. And in meditating, he has a mystical experience, that experience of touching the God self, the I am presence, right? The real self that exists behind the chatter of the egoic mind. And he gets hooked on this. And he's like, no, I don't want a doctorate. I'm going to go move out to the middle of the woods and be a hermit yogi, and the world can just leave me alone. But the world doesn't leave him alone. Through all of these synchronicities, the people just keep freaking bothering him, and they won't get off his land. And so he does this thing he calls the surrender experiment. He's like, well, if there's this, connecting force and it's out there pulling strings, what happens if I just say yes, if I surrender to whatever it is that's coming my way? And so he does. And over the course of this book, just by saying yes to all these things that he really doesn't want to do, which is what makes it so funny, he ends up building one of the most thriving spiritual communities in North America, and goes on to build a software company that revolutionizes the medical industry. It's bizarre. Now that's kind of like a glorious, larger than life example. And I'm not at all saying that all of us awakened ones have to go like revolutionize the medical industry or something. I think that my biggest takeaway from this book is that as humans, maybe we don't know what's best for ourselves. And we can actually have more satisfying, meaningful life experiences by surrendering ourselves to that current, the current of that all-seeing, all-knowing, all-loving power, right? God, consciousness, great spirit, source, the universe, whatever. In this, he calls it the flow of life. We humans spend a lot of our lives trying to pursue things we think will make us feel good and avoid things we don't. But have you ever gotten something you thought you really, really wanted, and you worked so f***ing hard for it and felt like the world was against you, and you finally got that thing, and it was totally anticlimactic? There's this idea you hear floating around spiritual circles sometimes about 2 kinds of dreams, but I think Christina Lopes has a beautiful way of articulating it. She says that there are ego dreams and there are soul dreams. So ego dreams are dreams of the egoic mind. They're what we think we want, but they're often not what we really want. We think we want them because they appeal to our ego. For example, for the longest time, I thought I wanted to be a certain kind of screenwriter. I had one amazing film teacher in high school, and I was like, yes, I want to do this with my life. And so for the better part of a decade, I had my heart dead set on the UCLA screenwriting program. I spent 2 years getting ready for it, like preparing my materials and getting amazing references. And I applied and I didn't get in. And I was f***ing crushed. But you know what my least favorite city on earth is? Like, I actually hate being there. It gives me such anxiety. Los Angeles. You know what culture I really am not a fan of? Hollywood. Bunch of lizard humping, satanic Freemasons. So the career I thought I wanted would not actually have filled my cup. Ego dreams are marked usually marked by some form of fame, wealth, and status. They may get us attention and make us feel shiny, but ultimately they don't feed our soul. Soul dreams, on the other hand, go deeper. This kind of goes back to the inner child, because a soul dream involves doing something for the sheer joy of it. And it's really hard to identify those kinds of dreams when our lives are crowded with thoughts about what we think we want. It reminds me of another Campbell quote: "We must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us." Here's the perfect example. Back in like the end of 2019, I started working on this e-commerce business, and I was so proud of this thing I was building, this product, because it didn't exist. And I was like, I want this to exist. And so I thought it was a great idea. And because of COVID, everything got pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. It was like supply chain issues. Everything was an issue. And so it didn't actually launch until 2021. So it was like a year and a half in the making, we'll say. And I launched it, and I made a couple grand back because I put more than that into it. And then it nosedived off a cliff. And I kind of let it, because I knew that in order to scale it, I was going to have to spend hundreds of hours analyzing ad performance, writing SEO content, brown nosing influencers, all the stuff you have to do in digital marketing. And I hate digital marketing. And when I finally got honest with myself and acknowledged that, I did not get out of bed for 3 days. I shit you not. I felt like a huge failure. I felt like I was being lazy because I knew that the product was good. I just didn't want to put the time and energy in. And it felt like giving up. And so I didn't get out of bed for 3 days. I was grieving a little bit for this thing that I really was proud of creating. But then at the end of that, I put it on a shelf. And y'all, I'm not kidding you when I say this is an amazing way of manifesting. Like, I know they teach it one way, but in my experience, here's what I did. Put the thing I thought I wanted on a shelf, turned to the universe, which is infinitely wiser than me, and was like, please send me an opportunity to learn how to build and scale businesses. And within a month, that venture studio stumbled on my YouTube channel and was like, hey, come be our idea sorceress and head storyteller. And now I get to do all of the high level stuff that I like to do. And I don't have to touch the marketing, just the fun stuff. And so for me, a huge theme in awakening is surrender. The way I think of it is this: a lot of people who walk the spiritual path get really into manifesting and trying to control their realities. They're like, I want that specific car, that specific person, that much money, and that specific job. And then they try to will it, force it, spellcast it, manifest it into existence. But here's the thing. Here's a hugely heretical opinion of mine. I think that system is fundamentally flawed because most people, if we're being honest, most people have no clue what makes them happy. Like, think about it. If people knew what made them happy, there would be more happy people, because humans, as hairless monkeys, we're very good at getting what we want. And often we think we want something because we imagine it's going to bring us some kind of emotional fulfillment, some sort of gratification. And then when it doesn't, we're off chasing the next thing. When we surrender to the flow of life, as Michael Sanger says, we are acknowledging that we don't see the big picture, right? All we ever see is our tiny, limited human perspective. So as humans, can we be certain that specific things in our line of sight are going to fill our cup? No, except for when we have like a noetic experience, right? But for the most part, in our day-to-day life, when we're operating in beta state, we're not privy to the infinite information happening outside the periphery of our life. But that field of consciousness is all-knowing, all-loving, and all-seeing. So it is safe to surrender to the flow of life because it is always trying to move us toward that state of healing and wholeness. Long story made short, this is idea sex for another time, but the universe wants us to self-actualize. That's the game, right? That's why we incarnate here on Earth School. And so when we do surrender to this thing that sees what we don't, we end up exactly where we're supposed to be. And for that reason, because I'm an idiot and that thing isn't, I personally choose to take this sort of surrendered approach to everything. So we've talked a lot about alignment in this video, and the key to alignment is healing. Healing is also the linchpin of a spiritual awakening. We've talked about that quite a bit, and it's an endless topic, but the idea I want to get across today is that when we heal on the inside, it starts to be reflected in our external world. Maybe it's a result of living in the holographic universe of, the law of attraction, law of manifesting, or just logical sense, because our thoughts create our beliefs create our emotions create patterns inform choices, and our choices shape our destiny, right? Rinse and repeat. That's the constant internal process of being a human. And so I think of healing work as ongoing refinements to that process. The work is never done, right? If we're making full use of the gift of self-cognition, that gift that separates humans from all other living earthbound things, if we're making full use of that gift, then we're always tinkering around back there, making the unconscious conscious, tweaking our thought patterns, tuning our emotions, and maybe course correcting our destiny just a little. And y'all, this is not necessarily like a woo-woo spiritual thing, right? It's the same thing that Jung was getting at with individuation, what Maslow was getting at with self-actualization, what Campbell was getting at with the hero's journey, which is why we did all three of those videos last year, because it's the same thing as a spiritual awakening. A spiritual awakening is the same thing, just with magic. That being said, a lot of people never take up this quest because healing is hard shit, right? A lot of us would rather stay stuck than get honest with ourselves about ourselves. Healing work means facing our shadow, in integrating it, addressing our core wounds, owning the parts of ourselves we rejected, suppressed, and denied, undoing the subconscious beliefs that keep us repeating the same shitty cycles again and again, transmuting shame, reparenting ourselves so that we don't pass our shit onto our children, right? That's heavy work. But something really incredible happens when we make the conscious decision to heal. We find that the work works. According to the woo-woo new age people, okay, as within, so without. Reality is a mirror. So when we start to do the work and we start feeling good on the inside, at that point we start drawing good things to us, right? The frequency we emit determines the experiences and the people we draw into our lives. It's, again, same thing, law of attraction, same principle underlying this. So as we do this mental and emotional rewiring, we are rewiring our energy. And this was such like a revelation to me. It's not going to come as a surprise to a lot of people who are on the path, because y'all know everything is about energy. Everything is about frequency. The universe is just doing this. It's just a wiggling through itself, as Alan Watts so profoundly said. I love that man. But for me, it was an epiphany that the energetic work is just as important as the mental and emotional work, or in fact, they're all intertwined. And this crystallized in like a moment, because I was working on 3 projects, all related to energy, that like coincided with one another. And so I was filming an e-course for a friend all about chakra healing. And so I was learning about like the body's energy system that way. I was reviewing like these basically writing about the scientific research for subtle energy fields and biofields, so chakras and auras and all that kind of stuff, energy medicine. And then on top of that, I was also taking voice lessons with a woman named Gina, this magical woman she's like a rock-trained opera singer. An opera-trained rock singer who is also a mystic that studied under the likes of Carlos Castaneda. So she's no joke. Like, the woman knows her shit, both when like musically, but like also when it comes to, the mystical underpinnings of life. And what I love about lessons with her is that it's music theory meets mysticism. And so, we'll be singing scales, but then we're also talking about how that feels and looks and resonates in our chakras, and how the human voice is actually a healing instrument. It can be used for that. Sound is a way of healing the biofield, right? Like our energetic field. It can help us bring the different components into balance. And in esoteric and occult teachings, when we are internally aligned, we become externally aligned. Okay, magic shit just happens, allegedly, who knows? But as we were doing this energetic work, I started to notice these really drastic shifts in my external life, both career and otherwise. And I was like, I wondered if there was something to it. And I remember walking into her magical little studio and she was like, "So how are you feeling?" And I was like, "Really good. I feel like my life is just coming together all of a sudden." And she was like, "Yeah, that's how you know the work is working." So in the future, this channel will have a playlist about subtle energy fields, energy medicine, energy healing, and the scientific research being done around that, because I think it's actually an important part of the puzzle. If that interests you, if spiritual awakenings interest you, if taking an analytical lens to mystical and spiritual things interests you, do subscribe and join the guild. And if you've been on the journey for a while, pray tell, if you've tumbled down the rabbit hole, what would you tell yourself at the start of your journey? What is it that you wish you would have known? I would love to hear in the comments. And in any case, I hope these videos were helpful. Thank you so much for having idea sex with me. And until next time, stay blessed. Gotta scoot back so my eyeballs are in focus. Okay, I got it in the little square. There. Hello and welcome back to eyeball. Ow. Inopportune moment for an eyelash to like lodge itself under my, oh, no, stop. Sometimes I wish I was like a lizard and had their little eye screens. It would save me a lot of hassle every time I put this shit on my face.